Well, it's been a day where we're trying to do the vectors lab, and the students found it really tough to do this lab, and so I decided to make a video on this. And I'm going to show you three methods of finding the resultant of two vectors in the lab. And pay attention carefully and see how it's done, because this is kind of the most important thing in physics. You have to know how to add two vectors. And there are actually many methods of doing it. I'm going to show you three ways of doing it. First of all, you had two vectors. One of them was 100 grams, and this is the 100-gram vector, and I'm not going to change it into newtons. I'm trying to keep it in grams. And this is about 4 centimeters, actually 4 centimeters, because I'm deciding that 25 grams is equal to 1 centimeter. So 100 grams is 4 centimeters. Now that's your vector P. And then you have vector Q, which is actually at an angle of 120 degrees, as you can see, and P is at an angle of 20 degrees. But this is 200 grams. Because we have taken 25 grams as 1 centimeter, you're going to have to draw this with a length of 8 centimeters. Okay, so 100 grams is 4 centimeters, 200 grams is 8 centimeters, and this angle between them is going to be 100 degrees. Because one is at 20, the other is 120, so the angle between them is 100 degrees. So that makes sense, right? Now what I did is, from the direction of vector P, now that's the direction of vector P, I've tried to draw vector Q. Isn't that Q? Yeah, because I've tried to draw it parallel to this. So this is vector Q. Now this angle is 100 degrees, because to get Q from P you had to have 100 degrees. If that angle is 100 degrees and the total angle is 180, then you know that this angle is 80 degrees inside the triangle. So that's 80 degrees. So that's your P. That's 100 degrees, and that's 80 degrees. And we're trying to find the resultant. Obviously, in this case, the resultant is given by this diagonal, because this is P, this is Q, and you join the ends and you get the resultant, which means the sum of the two vectors. And if you take a scale and a ruler, in fact, and measure this, you're going to get this length as 8.3 centimeters. Now 8.3 centimeters happens to be 8.3 times 25, which you get as 207, let's see, 207.5 grams. So this is method 1 to find the sum of two vectors. This is a geometric method where you use a definite scale, anything that you like. In this case, I've taken 25 grams as 1 centimeter. And as you can see, I've drawn the two vectors. And then at a correct angle, I've actually measured the angle, as you can see here. And then I got it to be 207.5 grams. So that's method 1. Now before I go to method 2, I want you to see how we could find these angles, especially this angle Q. Because once you get angle Q, you can figure out what angle P is, because the total is 180 degrees. Now in order to find angle Q, you have to use the law of sines. Okay, so that's method 2, and I'm trying that again. That's what we had. That was 100 degrees. This is 80 degrees. We're trying to find out P and Q if possible. And that's everything that I explained before in method 1. Now, according to the law of sines, sine of an angle divided by the opposite side. So if you take sine of P and divide it by P, you should get sine of the angle R divided by the opposite side. So that's the law of sines. So if you substitute into that, since you know P is 100 and the resultant R is 207.5, so you can plug it in, calculate, you will get P to be 28.3. So once you get P to be 28.3, you can figure out Q to be 71.7 degrees because the total should be 180 degrees. So I hope that's clear enough. That's how you find the angle. Now let's go on to method 2. In this method, again, this is the diagram. We're going to use either the law of cosines, that's one method. But what I also added here is in the actual lab, once you have these two, you need to figure out how much this is so that if you put the third one, this point does not move. And of course, this has to be exactly equal to the resultant of the two, which was 207.5 degrees. And surely now you know this angle because the total angle is 180. And we got this angle, so you can figure out how much this angle is. So in the lab, actually, you know the value of this is 207.5, and you also know the angle, and so which is going to be 108.3 degrees. So you know how to set it up so the point here is in equilibrium. All right. Now go on to method 2 to find the resultant. That's the same diagram. Now this is using the law of cosines. And according to the law of cosines, you have the resultant given by this formula. Just plug it into this. Remember that P is 100 and Q is 200. And cosine of R here is 80. When you do that, you get 207.5 grams. Again, that is method 2. Now, the method that I prefer is the third one, where you break up the vectors into its x and y components. That is the one that we're going to use throughout the semester, so please pay attention to that. So you had these two vectors, P and Q, and what you got to do is to find the resultant. This is everything that I explained before. You're going to break up the vector P into its two components. Let all this just roll by. Come on. Okay, there you can see that I've just split the vector P into its two components. That's the x and that's the y. And I've just added the protractor so it becomes easier for you. And this is going to be P cosine 20 because this angle here is 20. And the y is going to be P sine 20. So that's 100 cos 20 and this is 100 sine 20. and those are the values that you get. Now what I did is I did the same thing to the vector q. Now this is the q. That's the vector q, and remember that this angle is going to be 60 degrees, isn't it? Yeah, because it's 20 and 100, and then you got 60. So when you take this angle to be 60, you know that this is going to be 200 cosine 60, and this is going to be 200 sine 60. So let me write that. 200 cosine 60 is 100 grams, and then 200 sine 60 is 173.2 grams. Now you got to find the total y component. You see you have this one and you have the other. When you add those two, you get 207.4. And now since the x components are in opposite directions, you got to take the difference between them. It's 100 minus 94, which is 6. So now you have to take the square root of the sum of the squares of x and y, which will give you 207.5 grams. So that's method 3. But I also want you to see what actually happened when you took the sum. Just wanted to, all right, let's clean this out a little bit, save time here. I wanted to take out everything so you only see what's required. Okay, now this is what we had. Remember that this was your 6 that you got when you took the difference along the x, and then you added along the y, you got 207.4, and then you had to square this and add them up, you got 207.5. So I hope you understood what we're trying to do, and I've showed you 3 methods to find out how to add 2 vectors. Good luck and cheers.